All right, so let's dive into this. You've sent us some really interesting articles this time, all about kids and fasting during Ramadan.
Yeah.
We've got pieces from BBC Afrique,
Okay.
magicmom.com, parents.fr, the Muslim Parents Academy, and even a fascinating legal interpretation of Islamic law.
Oh, wow.
A fatwa from Egypt's Dar al-Ifta.
That's a great collection.
Yeah, it seems like you're really interested in when children are expected to start fasting during Ramadan.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating to me is how different that can look
Yeah.
in different Muslim communities around the world. And, we've got cultural perspectives, we've got religious guidelines, medical advice. We're really looking at a holistic picture.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're after is like a nuanced understanding
Exactly.
of all of that.
Yeah, not just the when, but the why and the how of this whole practice.
Exactly. And one thing that jumps out immediately is that there isn't one single age given for kids to start fasting. It seems pretty clear that it's not obligatory before puberty.
That's right.
Um,
Defining puberty is where things get a little bit tricky
yeah.
because it's not consistent across all of these sources.
Yeah.
Some, like the Dar al-Ifta fatwa, are very specific about physical signs,
Okay.
but others talk about an age of understanding.
So it's not just about reaching a certain age. It's
Right.
about a certain level of maturity or comprehension as well.
Exactly. It's about the child's ability to actually grasp the meaning and significance of the practice.
Yeah.
The Dar al-Ifta, for example,
Okay.
outlines very specific signs of puberty for both boys and girls.
Right.
Things like menstruation for girls, ejaculation for boys.
Okay.
But they also say that if those signs haven't shown up by age 15,
Okay.
then 15 becomes the default.
15.
Yeah.
That does seem
It's
younger than many might expect.
Than you might expect.
Yeah. Is that consistent across the
It is. Both magicmama.com and the Muslim Parent Academy also mention 15 as the age of obligation
Okay.
if the physical signs of puberty haven't appeared.
So we've got this interesting tension.
Yeah.
Puberty is the official marker across the board, but the meaning of puberty
Right.
might differ,
Exactly.
which is leading to this variation in practice. But then a lot of the sources say that parents often introduce fasting much earlier.
Much earlier
in puberty.
in puberty, yeah.
So what is the reasoning behind that?
That's a really good question. Why would parents
Yeah.
start earlier? Is it just to get children accustomed to the practice?
Right, like a gradual introduction.
Yeah, a way of kind of weaving those practices into a child's life from a young age?
Yeah, the BBC Afrique piece talks about kids in Senegal
Oh, yeah.
starting with half-day fasts or fasting once a week.
I was going to say, that reminds me of the story we have from Rias Izzadeen, who grew up in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
He started fasting at 7.
Wow.
But he makes it clear it was largely because everyone around him was doing it.
Oh, that's interesting.
His friends, his family.
Yeah.
It was just part of their shared life. And he even mentions having the option
Oh, wow.
to break the fast if it was a school day.
So that's really interesting. That highlights that cultural and familial aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's not just about a rule. It's about
Yeah.
being part of a community and participating in those traditions.
And it seems like there's a lot of flexibility and understanding built into that approach, too.
Right,
It's not about forcing children into a rigid structure,
right.
but about gently guiding them,
Yeah.
meeting them where they are developmentally.
So we've got religious guidelines, cultural influences, family traditions, all kind of intertwined.
All intertwined.
But what about the medical perspective? Is it actually safe for kids to fast?
Right, especially those who are still growing.
Yeah.
That's a really important question. And Parents.f actually consulted a pediatrician about this,
Okay.
who advises against fasting for children under 10,
Okay.
specifically because it could impact their growth.
That makes sense.
And even after age 10.
Yeah.
They emphasize the importance of closely monitoring the child's health watching for any signs of fatigue or difficulty
Oh, yeah.
and not pushing them beyond their limits.
It's a good reminder that every child is different.
Exactly.
And what's manageable for one might be challenging for another.
Exactly. And open communication between parents, children, and healthcare providers seems really important
Yeah.
in navigating this. But, it's also important to remember that Ramadan is about much more than just abstaining from food and drink.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of these articles emphasize that.
Yeah.
But I think we've only scratched the surface there. What are some of those other dimensions, those deeper meanings, especially for kids?
Well, I think what we see consistently across these sources is an emphasis on the spiritual and social aspects of Ramadan.
Okay.
So it's seen as a time for introspection,
Yeah.
self-improvement, for strengthening one's connection to faith. And it's also about deepening those bonds with family and community,
Right.
about reaching out to those in need.
So fasting is almost like a vehicle, a
Exactly.
means to.
It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating empathy, gratitude,
Okay.
a sense of shared humanity.
Now, even the sources that promote starting young seem to prioritize those deeper values over the physical act of fasting.
Yeah,
The Muslim Parents Academy, for example, mentions a hadith,
right.
which is a saying or tradition attributed to the Prophet Muhammad that encourages parents to begin teaching their children about prayer at age 7 and then gradually guide them towards fasting as they get older.
It's about nurturing a love for these practices, not imposing them.
Yeah, and that seems to be a recurring theme, approaching Ramadan with flexibility, understanding, and a focus on fostering faith and community.
I think you've hit on something really important there. Whether we're talking about when children start fasting, how families adapt the practice, or the emphasis on these spiritual aspects, there's this consistent message of allowing for individual needs and interpretations within this shared framework of faith.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if we dig even deeper into some of these individual stories,
Yeah,
will we see those values reflected in these personal experiences?
we have some really compelling anecdotes in these sources, stories that bring these complexities and the richness of Ramadan to life.
Let's hear them.
Let's start with that Radio Canada piece.
Okay.
They interviewed Egelis Abd, a young man experiencing his first Ramadan fasting while he's attending high school in Toronto.
Yeah, and I thought his story was really interesting, just the honesty,
Right.
the physical challenges.
Yeah.
You know how the first few days are kind of easy
Yeah.
because your body's still got energy reserves, but then it gets tougher as you adjust?
Exactly. He doesn't shy away from describing the impact on his concentration and his energy levels,
Right,
but he also highlights how his body adapts.
right.
It eventually becomes more manageable.
And I thought that was really interesting because it's kind of like a microcosm of the whole experience, isn't it?
It is. You have that initial adjustment period,
Right.
and then this settling and a finding of rhythm.
Exactly. And he also talks about how his classmates are really interested in it.
Yeah,
They ask him questions. They want to know why he's doing it, how it works.
I love that.
It's a great example of how personal faith practices can spark curiosity and open up a dialogue.
Absolutely. It becomes an opportunity for cultural exchange and understanding.
Yeah. Now, shifting gears a bit, some of these sources also talk about the economic side of Ramadan.
The economic side.
And that's where we see some interesting, almost paradoxical trends.
Yeah, tell me more.
So, on one hand, you've got this potential for decreased productivity
Right.
as people adjust to fasting.
As work schedules shift
Yeah.
and people's energy levels fluctuate.
Exactly. Some sources say that in countries with large Muslim populations,
Right.
they might see like a 20% dip in productivity during Ramadan.
That's significant.
Yeah, but on the flip side, you have the surge in consumer spending.
Oh, absolutely.
So people are buying more food for those nightly feasts.
Yeah, new clothes for Eid celebration.
Yeah, exactly.
Gifts for family and friends.
I think it was the BBC Afrique article
Yeah.
that said that in Egypt, household food expenditure can increase by 50 to 100% during Ramadan.
That's a staggering number.
It's huge.
It highlights the economic power of this month. Businesses are very aware of this.
Yeah.
They tailor their marketing and sales strategies accordingly.
It's like a whole new market opens up,
Right.
catering specifically to Ramadan observers.
Absolutely. And it's not just traditional retailers.
Yeah.
We're seeing this trend in online shopping travel packages.
Really?
Even entertainment.
Wow.
There was this really interesting stat in the source material.
Yeah.
Advertisers are willing to pay 3 times more for a commercial spot on MBC,
Okay.
which is a popular Arab TV channel,
Right.
during Ramadan,
That makes sense.
compared to any other time of year.
Yeah. Families are gathering,
Exactly.
breaking their fasts together, watching television.
They're a captive audience.
Prime time.
Primetime indeed. And it's not just commercials,
Right.
Ramadan-themed TV shows, movies, online content.
Yeah.
It's all part of this surge.
Wow. So it's like everyone is trying to tap into that Ramadan spirit.
Exactly.
Whether it's food, entertainment, shopping, or even charity.
Yeah.
But going back to those personal stories for a moment, I'm really drawn to that one about Rias Izzadeen, who started fasting at 7 in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
He talks about it almost as a communal experience.
Right.
Something he did because everyone around him was doing it.
His friends, his family, it was just part of their shared life.
Right. And what's interesting is that within like deeply rooted tradition,
Yes.
there was still room for flexibility.
There was. It's interesting, isn't it? Because he mentions being able to break his fast if he was struggling.
Yeah, especially on school days.
Right.
Which challenges that assumption that religious practice is always rigid and inflexible.
Exactly. It suggests that there's a focus on individual well-being
Right.
within that broader spiritual context.
And then he says he would be proud if his 7-year-old daughter chose to fast.
Oh,
knowing that she would have that same support and flexibility that he did.
it's a beautiful example of how traditions are passed down through generation,
Yeah.
adapted and personalized along the way.
And I think all of these stories and these individual experiences offer such a powerful counterpoint
Yes,
to some of the more generalized discussions about Ramadan.
I agree.
They remind us that this month, while deeply meaningful and spiritually enriching for many, also comes with its own set of challenges and complexities.
Right.
It's not a monolithic experience.
It's not.
It's a tapestry woven from all these countless individual stories,
I love that.
each one shaped by unique circumstances, cultural interpretations, family dynamics.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And I think exploring those individual threads
Yeah,
can give us an even richer understanding
absolutely.
of what Ramadan means to people around the world.
Shall we dive into some more of those stories then?
Let's do it.
So let's go back to Ambius for a second.
Okay.
The student in Toronto who's going through his first Ramadan fast while he's in high school.
Right.
I thought it was really interesting how he talked about feeling this sense of accomplishment,
Oh, yeah.
being able to keep up with his studies and his activities while he's fasting.
That is interesting. It's like he's not just going through the motions.
Yeah.
He's actively reflecting on what it means for him and how he's experiencing it.
Yeah, and processing both the challenges and the rewards.
Right. And how those are changing over time.
I remember he was talking about how his classmates were so curious.
Yeah, they were asking him all sorts of questions.
Yeah, they want to know why he's doing it, how it all works.
I love that. It shows how much potential there is for these personal experiences
Yeah.
to really create connections and understanding between people from different backgrounds.
Exactly. It's a real opportunity for cultural exchange.
Absolutely.
And then there's Rias, who
Yeah.
we've talked about a couple of
We
times.
love.
Yeah, growing up in Sri Lanka, fasting from the age of 7.
Right.
His story really highlights that communal aspect of Ramadan.
Oh, totally. How it's just woven into the fabric of daily life.
Yeah, and what I found really insightful was how much he emphasized flexibility.
Oh, yeah. Even within that tradition.
Yeah, even within that really deeply rooted tradition.
I mean, he was allowed to break the fast if he needed to.
Yeah, especially on school days.
Right.
It challenges that idea that religious practice is always about strictly following the rules.
Exactly. It suggests that there's this awareness of individual well-being
Yeah.
that goes hand in hand with that spiritual discipline.
And then he talks about his own 7-year-old daughter
I know, such a sweet story.
and how he'd be proud if she chose to fast,
Yeah,
knowing that she'd have the same flexibility and support that he did.
I love that. It's like such a beautiful example of how traditions are passed down,
Right.
but also adapted to meet the needs of each new generation.
And it really speaks to the diversity of experience within Ramadan.
Yeah, there's no one right way to observe this month.
Exactly. Think about those Senegalese families who have their kids start with half-day fasts.
Right.
Or fasting just once a week.
Or the schools that make accommodations for students who are fasting,
Yeah.
offering separate spaces during meal times or prayer rooms.
It shows how these religious practices are always in conversation
Yeah.
with the social contexts in which they're lived out.
That's a great point.
Now, we should also acknowledge that some of these articles point out some potential downsides.
Oh, yes.
Like the social tensions that can sometimes come up.
Yeah, the fatigue, the pressure to conform.
The health risks that might be associated with overeating during those nightly feasts.
Right. Ramadan is not without its challenges.
It's a good reminder that even within something as profoundly meaningful as Ramadan,
Yeah,
there are complexities, challenges,
Nuance.
and these ongoing conversations.
exactly.
It's not a simplistic or idealized experience,
Yeah.
but a really multifaceted one that plays out in so many different ways across the globe.
It is, and that's what I find so fascinating about it.
Yeah.
We're looking at something that touches on faith culture, family community, even economics.
It really highlights how all of these seemingly separate parts of life are actually interconnected.
Absolutely.
So, where do we land after all of this?
Yeah.
What have we learned about when kids start fasting for Ramadan?
Well, it seems like the answer is both simple and complex.
Okay.
Simple in that there's no one-size-fits-all age,
Right.
no hard and fast rule,
No magic number.
but complex in that the decision is influenced by all these different factors.
Right.
Religious guidelines, cultural norms, family traditions, individual circumstances, and even medical considerations.
What really stands out to me is that Ramadan is so much more than just rules and rituals.
Yes.
It's an opportunity for growth, for reflection, for connecting more deeply with one's faith, family, and community.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that can be started at different ages and in so many different ways.
Beautifully put. I think that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah.
There's no one right way to approach this.
Yeah.
It's about finding what's personally meaningful and authentic
Right.
within the context of your own life.
And as we wrap up,
Yeah.
I'm left with a question that maybe our listener can think about too.
Okay.
We've explored all these different perspectives on Ramadan,
We have.
but how do other religious traditions approach fasting?
Oh, that's interesting.
What are the similarities and the differences? How do
Yeah.
they involve children?
What a great question. It would be amazing to compare and contrast those different approaches.
Yeah, to look at the history, the spiritual significance,
Yeah,
the ways different faiths engage with this ancient practice.
that sounds like another deep dive waiting to happen.
Maybe our listener will send us some sources on that very topic and we
Yeah.
can explore it together.
I love that.
Until then, Ramadan Mubarak to all those observing.